Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, HR Planning Step-by-Step with Wolverine and SAP Analytics Cloud. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Ramina, and I'll be hosting today's session. So today's webinar is in conversation with Simplify Solutions and Wolverine Worldwide, and you'll get the chance to learn about how Wolverine uses SAP Analytics Cloud to reach their project goals and overcome challenges. So we're really pleased to have our speakers here with us today. We have Andrew Nyholt, who is the Financial Planning and Analysis Senior Manager at Wolverine, as well as Brian Schnautz, IT Senior Manager at Wolverine, and Eric Blondin, VP of Platform and Technologies at Simplify Solutions. So today we do have a jam-packed session for you, but I did want to go over some housekeeping tips just to help you navigate the console that's in front of you right now. So to the right of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. So please do use this to ask any questions that you may have throughout the session, and we'll be answering them throughout today's session. As well, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so if there are any frequently asked questions, we'll be addressing them at that time. We also have a lot of resources listed for you in the resource box on your webinar console. So over here, you can find any extra resources to learn more about SAP Analytics Cloud. You can also find resources pertaining to today's topic. And you can also download the slides for today's session. If you have any trouble viewing them through the webinar console, you can just download the PDF through that box and follow along. And lastly, I'd just like to point out our survey. We definitely do look at all of the responses, and we do prioritize it when we're planning future webinars. Today's survey is only 2 questions, and they're both multiple choice, so please do take some time to fill that out at the end of today's webinar. And you can actually access the survey widget by clicking on the 3 smiley faces on your bottom toolbar. All right, so that's it for my introduction. I'll now hand it over to Eric, who will talk a little bit about Simplify Solutions first.
Thank you, Zarmina. So I assume everyone now sees my slides. So thank you very much for attending this webinar today. Welcome. I will not take a lot of your time. I'm just going to talk 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning, just so you know who Simplify is. And then I'll really pass the presentation to my colleagues at Wolverine, who will really entertain you on the project they've been going through in the past year. So quickly, who is Simplify? Simplify, we're finance and analytics experts. Most of our team is really CPAs, MBAs, people specialized in the finance sector on SAP technologies. So obviously today, the focus is Analytics Cloud. And actually, in the past year, our focus has been Analytics Cloud. But we do cover all the other solutions in that area from SAP, namely Data Warehouse Cloud, Group Reporting, and historically we were very focused on BPC. We do have offices mainly in Chicago and also a small office in Montreal. Obviously, being a small firm makes delivering quality and having 100% referenceable customers our single number 1 priority. Without happy customers, we can't really build our brand and help other customers be happier. So 100% referenceable is really the way we look at any project we start. One of the things you'll hear about today is our prepackaged solutions. A lot of our prepackaged solutions are used to start projects, and Wolverine is no exception in that. We have built a lot of high-value content in Analytics Cloud today that really enable us to start a project and build from it. In some cases, our pre-packed content may even be the solution you need, and there's no additional development required. So it really accelerates how your financial planning and other solutions are built out and capitalized on in Analytics Cloud. If following today's discussion, you actually want to know a bit more about these solutions. Wolverine did use them, and other customers are using them, so we are organizing webinars over the next few months. The next one I'll be hosting is actually on April 14th. on April 14th is about HR planning, which is really our topic today. So we'll talk about a project today and what it brought to Wolverine. But if you want to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit more, understand the solution, please join us on April 14th. You can download the slide and also the newsletter in the download section today, and you'll have the link to register for that webinar. Separately, you'll also find other webinars from my colleagues, from Beth McGreen on May 26th. So this is end-to-end planning. John Essig for sales planning around June 16th, and Yaret Gallic on May 5th around capital planning. So these are great webinars. Well, you understand a bit more certain components of our pre-packed content that really cover the whole FP&A function. So additionally to that, in the newsletter, that's also in the download section. And as a reminder, those slides are in the download section as well for this presentation. So you can download them right now if you want to. So, but in our newsletter, you'll have a lot of interesting content, obviously about our webinar today, other events where we are hosting over the next few months, some of them I just mentioned, some Analytics Cloud case studies. Just download them and you can read through and understand what was done with Analytics Cloud at other customers. Obviously, great news on our newsletter about the latest additions to our leadership team, and also in other webinars. One of them I'll bring your attention to, which is actually next week, and I think we'll have a lot of interest from a lot of you, is John Essig, Managing Partner at Simplify, will actually be participating to a discussion around the future of finance and data warehousing, and this will be with the SAP Head of Planning, Matthias Kramer, and also some of you may know him, a great data analytics speaker, Wayne Eckerson. So really, if this is something that interests you, again, in the download section, get our newsletter, and you can register to this webinar, among many others. Finally, May 19th to 20th, we are organizing in cooperation with SAP a great training session, 2-day session, where we will go through how to build a solution like this. So April 14th, we'll demo you the solution, what you can do with it. But May 19th and 20th, how to actually implement that kind of solution. And we will be working with SAP Center of Expertise, who will be driving most of the presentation. To understand what will be covered in there, you'll have, it's going to be 2 half days, okay? Again, if you download the newsletter or go and download the slides, you have the registration links at the bottom. And you will have on the first day an introduction from John Essig, again, Managing Partner at Simplify, an introduction from around the SAP Planning Roadmap with Eric Smith, VP Global COE and Analytics, and a customer who will talk about using this kind of solution, a bit similar to what you're doing today, and then really getting into how to build. First, on the first day, it's really end-user reports, and on the second day, while I'll be doing the introduction, you will get more information on how to build the functions, the back-end functions, how to actually build the planning model. So if you really want to know more about the kind of solutions we're going to be talking today, and multiple great events you can attend, do download our 2 documents, and then you'll be able to register all of them. Thank you very much. And now I'll actually pass the microphone to my colleagues at Wolverine, Ryan and Andrew. Ryan, Andrew, you may be on mute.
Thanks, Eric. This is Andrew Nyholt. I'm the FP&A lead at Wolverine Worldwide, partnering with Eric and Ryan on developing the solution for our company. I'd like to first walk you through a little bit about Wolverine Worldwide so that you can get a sense of what the solution could do for us in the complexities of our company. So I'll talk first about who is Wolverine Worldwide, then Ryan will walk you through a little bit of our perspective from our technology group, and then I'll walk you through the details of our solution as we built it out. So as an overview of the company, we are a family of brands. We have 12 brands in the portfolio, primarily focused on footwear with some apparel and accessories as well. In 2019, we had $2.3 billion in revenue, and then in 2020, $1.8 billion in revenue. 40% of our pairs are sold outside of the U.S., and we're experiencing a lot of growth in our e-com business. So to speak a little bit to the channels that we distribute our product in, a lot of our product goes through regular retail stores, such as a Dick's Sporting Goods or Macy's or department stores, other footwear retailers. But we also have a very robust, and we invest a lot in our online websites for our brands. So you can go to the .com of any of our brands and see the product that we make and we market and we distribute. I'll walk you through the 12 brands briefly just so you get a sense of who we are. A lot of times people will be introduced to Wolverine Worldwide and they won't recognize the company name, but most everybody recognizes our brands because our brands are the face of the company to the consumer. So to start, we have our company broken out into two different groups depending on where our brands are headquartered. The first 4 brands are centrally located in Boston, Massachusetts, and they consist of the Sperry brand, the Saucony brand, the Keds brand, and the Kids group. For us, the Sperry brand is #1 in boat around the world and #1 in rain boots. Saucony is a well-recognized running shoe brand, and Keds is a brand that many will recognize for their iconic canvas shoes. Our Kids group manages children's and toddlers and kids' shoes across the portfolio on a multi-brand platform that meets the needs of those younger consumers. Our next 2 slides will show the 8 brands that are centrally located in our Rockford, Michigan headquarters. One of our biggest brand in the portfolio is Merrell. They're #1 in the hiking category. You may recognize them if you're into outdoor activities. I know a lot of people have gotten into that over the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic, trying to get outside. Along those same lines, Chaco, #3 brand, and water sandals are something that have a very loyal consumer base, and people seem to love them. They're a great brand as well. Hush Puppy and Harley Davidson are 2 of our other brands, and then our final 4 brands are Wolverine, Cat, Bates, and High Test. This really primarily includes the category of work boots, Wolverine being #1 in the work boot category, and Cat being #3 in the work boot category. So the company is really big in work boots, really big in hike, and also some of the fashion brands such as Sperry and Keds and Hush Puppies round out the portfolio. So a lot of different brands, and leading us to the topic that I think is relevant for this webinar, that business is very diversified, crosses many categories and consumers. But what I want to focus on here for this discussion is that we sell our product across many regions through many different channels. So our company setup and our organizational structure is relatively complex because we're involved in operations not only in the U.S. and Canada, but Europe, Asia, and Latin America. In fact, our footwear is sold in over 200 countries around the world, and not only through wholesale, like I mentioned. Some of that product is sold through our e-commerce channels online, others through physical retail stores, and much of our product internationally is sold through third-party partners that are specialists in a specific country. At this point, I'll pass it over to Ryan to talk a little bit about our IT centers of excellence and our operational platform, as well as lead into the specifics of our project.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. My name is Ryan Schnautz, and I'm the Senior IT Manager over our SAP BW and Analytics Cloud solutions. As we look across our brand portfolio in various lines of business, having a strong operational platform is really critical in supporting our brands worldwide. So a large component of this is really focused on centers of excellence within the company. And, primarily focusing on technology, I'd like to walk you through the history of our financial planning, and then we'll walk through the project timeline and plan. So looking back just over a decade ago, we were using SAP BPS, or Business Planning and Simulation. And this solution was primarily IT managed within the organization. The configuration was heavily coded to support the business requirements. And really as a result of that, it required IT and our FP&A team to have a strong working relationship in order to support that quarterly planning process. One of the big benefits of having the SAP solution at that time was really the direct integration with our SAP BW, or data warehousing system, and we used that to help seed our historical actuals into the planning templates from the data warehouse. So on the inverse side of that, when a planner was finished entering in their information and they would save it or publish it, that data could then be consumed immediately within SAP BW by using a simple query. So the integrated functionality really helped to cut down on the time needed to validate the information using proven reporting within SAP BW. However, as our business grew, BPS quickly became a little bit of a bottleneck in the planning space as our brands required additional flexibility as the user interfaces were a little bit dated at the time. So they were primarily ALV grid views with options to enable light versions of embedded Excel. And the reporting was really restricted to some subtotals and aggregated results. So in addition to this, with IT solely owning the configuration and enhancements, it required any changes to be prioritized with other IT projects and support activities. So as a result, HR workforce planning was never adopted into this platform, and it continued to be handled offline within Excel. So for many of these reasons, we decided to upgrade to Oracle's Hyperion solution for financial planning. So in 2016, we went live with Hyperion, and really the goal of moving to this was to really make sure we could bring HR workforce back into a systematic solution. So at that time, we also made the decision to transfer the ownership of the planning development and administration back into the FP&A group. So this really allowed our business partners to better manage the planning solution outside of frequent IT support during those planning cycles. And, Hyperion was really the first solution that provided us with some integration to Microsoft Excel for some of those business functions that just had a lot of plan data to enter. So we were also able to implement some unique planning templates through Hyperion, some systematic allocations, and some integrated reporting outside of our SAP BW Analyzer tool. And while Hyperion really provided us new functionality we no longer wanted to really be without, it lacked that direct integration with SAP. So as a result, we would move data from our data warehouse into Hyperion, and we'd move data from Hyperion back into our data warehouse for that consolidated reporting. So this is an incredibly iterative process, very time-consuming, and really as a result, the business started to treat Hyperion as just a data entry tool and not really a place where they can do their plan and also do all their analysis. So as we started to the end of support for the current version of Hyperion that we are on, Andrew and I really decided to take a new look at planning and really reevaluate the options that were available on the market. So here we are today, SAP Analytics Cloud. So in 2018, we were introduced to SAP Analytics Cloud for its dashboarding and data visualization functionality. And in 2019, we were to its planning engine by the Simplify team. So they had held some discussions at some conferences and really helped us to better understand some business cases for moving forward with SAC to support analytics and planning. So as we continue to further review the solution, we saw a really big opportunity to bring in one system that was fully integrated with all of our other SAP applications that we have, and a true single platform to align planning and analytics across the entire organization. So the big unlock for us is the ability to move away from this offline planning in Microsoft Excel. And, in order to do that, we really needed a one-stop solution where our planners could start and finish their process without having to multitask across various applications. And lastly, I think, SAC absolutely aligned with our cloud-first approach. And we've also linked it to our Active Directory so that we can support single sign-on into the space with multi-factor authentication. So for us in the IT space, it fit well into our security architecture and made it really easy for our users to access the system and not have to log in with yet another username and ID. So a very good fit for us. So taking a quick look at our project timeline here, we started this overall effort back in March of 2020. And, I mentioned that we really wanted to take a new holistic look at planning. So we spent quite a few months just re-blueprinting our entire financial planning process end to end, including HR workforce. So again, the idea of really building out a new truly integrated process and really making sure we don't have any silos when we're done with this. So what did it take to do that, right? So our project team consisted of 13 internal team members plus our implementation partner, Simplify. This group has representation for all of our campuses globally and within each brand, group, and function. So when we really look at each planning function, so HR, workforce, and expense, those are both complete, and we've still got a few more to go, as you can see. So we've really allocated 2 to 3 months for each one of these planning functions for the bill. So 15% of that was really allocated to a deep dive blueprint. We then allocated another 65% to actually building out the model, loading up the data, building out any data actions, stories, and really making sure we have that technical documentation in place. The next 15% of the time was spent with, power user training, the user acceptance testing, building out that user documentation, and then, the last piece was really set up for that go, no-go. So we're going through this very iterative cycle for each planning function that we're developing within the Analytics Cloud. And when we get to that go, no-go stage, what we're doing is we're actually taking our completed product in the SAC QA tenant, and we're moving that to our production system, and we're halting all changes to it. So going forward, if we have any adjustments to HR workforce planning in the future, it'll go through our standard change management policies and procedures. But again, as I mentioned, we're still in the middle of the overall planning effort, and we're really looking forward to our successful go live in August later this year. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Andrew, and he's going to walk through the HR workforce in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ryan. So I'll take a deeper look for everybody at the company first and the workforce planning that we do at Wolverine and why it has turned out to be complex and why this solution made sense for us. So just to provide a little background on our workforce planning, we've got 3,400 or so domestic and foreign production office and sales employees, which are all managed by our HR department internally. But to make the switch from org charts and payroll files to future forecasts for each individual person, financial forecasts that can be tracked against in GLs in order to manage our annual plan and our quarterly forecasts, we really need a system to bring that all together. To expand on that, we have over 300 cost centers that those employees live in, and those employees span 20 different countries. So we have probably 50 finance users who are responsible for a certain area of the business. And as I mentioned before, we've got 12 brands and multiple channels. And so those finance owners of their respective areas, they're responsible for a list of cost centers that falls into their budgets and their P&Ls and all the employees that fall within those. So as things evolve and change over the course of a given plan year, those employees may have, promotions, mid-year equity or cost of living raises. We may have people exit the company for retirement or other reasons. We may be adding to our teams in certain cases where we have growth opportunities and investment in people and teams, and all that needs to be quantified. It needs to be staged out, and it needs to be rolled up and consolidated for the company as a whole. So it's not simple as far as the amount of data goes, but what we've been able to do with this workforce planning solution is really simplify the way it's done across all those areas in one single place. Prior to implementing our SAC planning, we used a Hyperion workforce planning solution. This actually was a big step forward for us when compared to our legacy Excel-based workforce planning solution. Prior to Hyperion, I think Ryan touched on this a little bit, but from a finance person's perspective, prior to Hyperion, we were distributing an updated Excel spreadsheet with a lot of formulas built into it so that people could calculate their people costs for their cost centers, and then they would load their people costs by the GL level into their plan. So it really was an Excel-based solution prior to Hyperion. With Hyperion, we were able to systematize it and consolidate it in one place, but SAC planning was able to do that and more, just due to the customization and build-out that was possible in SAC. So I'll touch on a little bit more of that later, but just to round out the conversation about how the workforce planning works at our company, so you can compare it to yours, and maybe if you have a question, you can throw it in the Q&A. But how our process works is, as I mentioned, there's finance leads with P&L responsibility for a set of cost centers, and they really partner with the department leads within their group and their HR partners who are assigned to that group as well. So it's a team effort to try to get this information pulled together. I can give a quick example. You may have one of our brands. I think I mentioned, Merrill might have a team that manages their marketing function, and their Merrill finance person would partner with the department lead for Merrill marketing as well as the HR partner to determine what the team structure was, what it needed to be, and any changes to that team that were expected to occur over the year. They would align on those things, and the finance lead would utilize this tool to enter all of that information in the system and be able to track it against the actuals as the year went on as a part of our global planning process. So just to note that this is only one component of what is the wider planning process that provides us with the full P&L, and cash flow statement and everything that we need as a public company to be able to project our financials internally and track against them. So I'll move on specifically to our blueprinting phase that we performed with SAC. And what I want to focus on here are the decisions that we made regarding the scope of the project and what we were wanting to add to the Hyperion solution. Now, the Hyperion solution that we had was not bad in and of itself, but it was nearing the end of its life. And as we considered SAC, we also had considered the cloud-based Hyperion planning solution that's offered, where the big decision point, or the driving decision point, was to move us to SAC. It was really the integration that we were able to get with our BW and our ERP system that's also on an SAP platform. So we believe that to be a major driver of that decision, in addition to the fact that our internal IT group was maintaining the direct ownership over a lot of those SAP solutions that we had. And our Hyperion solution, as Ryan had mentioned, was really an FP&A focused thing. So we wanted to leverage the skills and abilities of our internal IT teams to have a more integrated planning process, and rather than a process that, as Ryan mentioned, was more of an input tool that only spit out the results. So we're making great progress on our integrated planning across all areas, but specifically for workforce, what we wanted to do, where we specifically set out to do these things, include running systematic transfers between cost centers. So to speak to that briefly, we do, given all the cost centers we have, all the brands we have at the company, there's what I think is a great ability for people to spend their career at the company in a variety of different roles. But what that means is that over the course of the year, employees will transfer internally from one brand to another, one channel or one function to another, et cetera. And what we wanted to do was build a process where if one financial person owned a certain cost center and planned that, they could transfer a person to a receiving cost center, and the financial lead in that receiver would be able to take those dollars in that person and have those costs reflected accurately. And what we were comparing to was a situation where we didn't have that integration between cost centers in Hyperion. What we built there prior to this was a solution where we would have to remove the person altogether from the system and then add them back in as a new hire, which caused a couple of issues that this was able to solve, one of which was the different finance leads didn't always align perfectly because they could operate independently. With this solution, it requires people to operate more collaboratively and follow the process that we've built out, which is really critical for a company of this size to make sure that everything is aligned and that there's no gaps. The second thing that we really wanted to focus on as a process improvement is the ability to review multiple cost centers at one time right in the core system. So while we were able to take data out of Hyperion and bring it into BW to review or other areas, what we wanted to do was create a space where if I was a finance owner of a brand and that brand had multiple cost centers that rolled up into it, I wanted some flexibility around being able to plan that in one place and kind of build out that under one functional leader, even if it involved multiple cost centers. So that may be unique to our business in a certain way, but I think there are probably many businesses out there, many of the attendees on the call may experience that same issue where they have the requirement to go through things more or less one by one, and they would want to see things in different views where multiple cost centers could be shown. I'll just make a comment here on the flexibility of SAC and the important additions to the pre-packed content that our integration partner Simplify was able to provide. As we were going through this blueprinting phase, it really was a partnership between us and our integration partner to figure out what could the system do, what were our systems currently doing, and what were we really trying to drive for. And the customization in the tool and the ability to build on that pre-packed content was really critical for us. Just moving down my list as I comment on these topics, the robust and integrated data security in this area was another critical step that we wanted to make sure was in scope. Given the sensitivity of the information that we're dealing with in HR planning, we wanted to make sure that we could manage user access on an individual basis. For example, we may have finance managers who are overseeing a certain set of cost centers, but they wouldn't need to or wouldn't want to have the access to see sensitive employee data across the cost centers that they were not responsible for. So we were able to integrate robust data security within the tool that allowed us to properly limit and manage on an ongoing basis that security functionality. Next, what we wanted to ensure was that we had reporting in an enhanced way for review and analysis of these costs. So tracking those dollars as they flowed from org charts to GL balances and being able to answer questions quickly as things came up was really important for our finance users. Many times, as anybody who's doing planning or forecasting knows, when we get into the year and we're comparing back to our plan or our budget, questions will come up about variances to budget. And we wanted to ensure that this was a place where people would go to research those variances and to be able to get to answers quickly. So we were able to build out some reporting that was really helpful in that area. And then the final thing that I'll mention is we wanted to achieve a good visibility into the components of total compensation. So this is another area where the customization was really nice on top of the pre-packed content that Simplify was able to provide. We were able to layer in our incentive compensation plans, unique tax costs and calculations that were applicable for various countries around the world, and any other ancillary employee costs that were directly tied to an employee. We were able to get integrated right into the tool, which allowed our users to just have a one screen view of the components of the total compensation cost to the company by the employees that they were responsible for, which is not only important for the ongoing users, but also really critical for us as we onboard any new finance leaders within the company and they get accustomed to this tool for the first time. Just having that visibility really accelerates the onboarding process for anybody who's trying to get into it for the first time, just because we were able to build it to be very intuitive to people. Popping forward, I've got a couple of slides that get into a little more detail on the process. So if you were a user, I thought it would be helpful to see the steps in our process and perhaps compare it to yours and see what the system was able to do for us. So the first step in our process is that we have an administrator that reports into my team that exports the current list of the active employees into SAC along with applicable tax and fringe rates, depending on the jurisdiction, state or country, province, et cetera, that they're in. That stages up all the data for the work that needs to be done for our planning cycle. The second step that happens is that all the users log into the system and they review and update their current teams or the cost centers that they're responsible for with any known changes. So I know the screenshot is really small, but I can describe it a little bit. What it shows is a list of employees under a cost center that the user is able to filter on. So if I was responsible, I'll just use Merrill Marketing again as an example. If I was responsible for Merrill's marketing cost centers, I could filter right on my story in SAC exactly what I want to see and the employees that are relevant to my current project. And I'll be able to see their current salary and then any calculations or adjustments beyond that, which could include the annual merit or cost of living increases that I wanted to layer into that, or any bonuses that were expected for the coming year. And all that is done at the employee level, so any changes can be pushed to the plan P&L. The third step is another screen we were able to build out to capture any promotions or compensation adjustments outside of our annual merit and cost of living adjustments. So again, you can use that same filtering process to capture the employee set that you want and then make adjustments from there on increases in responsibility, or perhaps if somebody was going to exit the company through a retirement, perhaps this is where you could make an adjustment to how that compensation was expected to be spread over the months in the year. So moving on a little bit, a couple of the important things that we wanted to make sure were functional were adding the new hires and, as I mentioned before, transfers. The first step is new hires and replacements. So this is where the users would add new hires and replacements one by one, because they wouldn't come through the PeopleSoft initial data load that captures all the existing employees. So that means if there's an open headcount on a certain team, we've built in functionality where a finance user could layer in that employee and add all of the required fields to get their compensation to calculate correctly, including their start month, their work state, their expected salary, bonus plan, et cetera, et cetera. So All of that information can be captured in one place to build out your list of new hires or replacement positions that are not in your current workforce. After that, employees expected to transfer are assigned and accepted through a process built to ensure alignment. I touched on this briefly before, but this is a quick screenshot of what that looks like. If I was a cost center owner and I needed to move somebody that was in my cost center over to one of my counterparts in a different brand or function, I would select that person, I would select their transfer date, and I would submit the transfer. The admin would approve it and send it over to the receiver, and the receiver would receive a notification that said that they had a transfer in their queue to accept. That would allow it to flow to the receiver cost center, and those costs would be assigned appropriately there. So finally, I added a couple of screenshots to the deck here on the review process. And this was really important for us too. Not only was the build of the plan really important for our users, it was also about being able to review for accuracy, and then, as I mentioned earlier, review for ongoing analysis and variance exception explanations. So we were able to build out multiple reports that broke down the details for all the users, including reports that provide total compensation by employee, and that would be broken down by category, such as base salary, fringe benefits, taxes, bonuses, etc. The second one would be total compensation by department. So a department leader could understand their total cost of employees and compare it to prior years or prior periods and make sure that they were hitting their budget targets appropriately. The third report that we were able to create was a GL account level roll-up. So as actuals flowed through in our ERP system from our payroll, that's all applied at the GL account level. So we were able to link up all of these costs appropriately so that they would parallel our actuals and could be easily compared as we realized actual months of activity and compared it to our plan. And then the fourth and the fifth reports are really more focused towards my team and the consolidated review of the company. So at the corporate FP&A level, a lot of what I'm and my team are doing are consolidating a lot of this information that comes from all corners of the business. So to be able to step back and review with the HR leaders, the CFO, et cetera, what the workforce costs are for the entire company and being able to slice that in many different cuts and be able to understand the information in a detailed way through visualizations and reporting was really critical so that we could tell the right stories about what was happening in the company as a whole and where changes were happening so that we could ensure that we were investing in the most critical areas of the company and that we were controlling costs across the entire company as we compared it to prior years and other strategic initiatives of the organization. And then the final consolidated picture is all new hires, replacements, and promotions. So there are times where we would want to review this to determine whether we needed to pull forward or hold back on open positions, and this allowed us to look at that in kind of one comprehensive way and report on that in a really clean and accurate way that could be traced back to the detail right in the system. So all of those impacts help us tell all the stories that anybody in an FP&A function is probably very accustomed to trying to do. It's just really nice that we were able to do it in a way that made it very efficient for us to tell those stories and to get that information. And I attribute a lot of that to the functionality and flexibility within SAC and the ability of our integration partners to help us build out customization on top of that. So from there, I just have one slide on some of the feedback we got and the next steps that we're driving towards. The business seemed really pleased with the solution, and they specifically called out that they'd be able to use this to have better alignment with their HR teams. So as finance people sometimes speak in accounts and numbers, and HR partners seem to speak in org charts and structures, they were able to bridge that gap in a really important way that allowed them to drive efficiency and clarity on their goals. The second comment that we got back from the business was that they were able to see a full picture of their department. Rather than trying to roll up components of their department, they were able to look at it right in the system here as a full integrated cost structure for communications with their department leads that they were trying to work with and other leadership teams. The next comment that was really critical, I think, is the partnership between our finance team and our FP&A team, as well as in partnering with our IT team. So, Ryan and his team's involvement in the build and his ongoing involvement in the continued maintenance and ongoing development of improvements here is going to be a critical partnership. So I guess I'm probably not here to give recommendations, but if I was giving a recommendation for anybody considering this tool, I would say to build your project team inclusive of finance and IT support so that you can start that partnership right from the beginning and make sure that the solution can be integrated across those different functions so that the users ultimately get an optimized experience. And then finally, achieving alignment between functions on internal transfers was really an important win for us as we really weren't able to have that in the same way in the Hyperion solution. The flexibility built into SAC and the customization that we were building on it really allowed us to get a win there. Going down to the bottom of the slide, just to speak to the ongoing support structure for this tool, maybe a question that some have out there as you seek to integrate something similar. We do have one full-time employee focused on this tool and on the process, organizing it and coordinating it with all those different users as a system administrator. My team is leading the process and governance of the tool and any changes, giving approval and drafting, blueprinting, the requirements there. And then our IT team is supporting technical enhancements, maintenance, and integration with any other SAC models that are being built out. So one thing I'll say about SAC is, well, it's great that it can help us plan with their planning-enabled models. One thing that's really an unlock for us is that it's integrated planning and analytics. So all the things that we're planning, we can quickly pivot to telling stories on and showing visualizations on that data. It's just getting that right enabled plan natively in the same tool and having those both in one place was really helpful to us and something that we were very impressed with. On the next steps for our project, we are hoping to add some further enhancements as a phase 2 implementation of the project. And I know based on our discussions with the integration partner, all these things are possible. It's just a matter of working through the functionality and building it out. So what we're planning to do is embed our organizational structures directly from our SuccessFactors platform that will allow us to have org structures living natively in the tool. We would like to create a direct connection to our recruiting software. So if you think back a couple slides to when people were entering new hires and replacements, that data is duplicated in our recruiting software as well. So to connect those two tools and be able to drive those positions directly in here for people to review rather than enter would be helpful to us. The third step would be to provide our HR team direct access to their cost centers for review and alignment. Historically, and even today, it's the finance users who have initial access to this, and the HR teams will receive reporting from them. And while the reporting is much better in this tool, having the HR team be able to directly access some stories right in SAC will allow us to have visibility on their end to questions that today have to funnel through the finance team. Fourth target that we have going forward is to allow for more frequent or real-time updates as changes occur, and this kind of falls within, embedding the organizational structures and creating the connection for recruiting. Today, the company has an annual plan or budget process and then a quarterly reforecast. But with this tool, we think that it's more than possible to allow the teams to have more frequent updates and be able to calculate changes as the weeks and months progress between our formal forecasts. And then finally, as I mentioned, analytics and insights being embedded right in the same tool as our planning software is really critical. So there's no limit to the potential of development on that. It's just as much as we would want to analyze and assess, the system seems capable of. So it's really been more than we even thought it could be, and that was another critical thing for us as we partnered with our implementation partner to be able to understand what it is that we didn't know about the tool and what it could do. So Simplify has been great in that area about teaching us what their other customers have tried and gave us some ideas on what we might potentially want to propose for ourselves. So with that, I will pass it back to the moderator, and if there are any questions that we can address that are common themes, we would love to respond to those. So I'll pass it back to you, Zarmina or Eric.
Actually, Eric, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Andrew. We actually have quite a few questions, so we'll try. I did reply to a few saying we would answer at the end in the verbal Q&A. Some of you have been answered, but we'll be asking those questions to Andrew and Ryan if we have the time. We currently have 8 minutes left. So one of the questions that came out a few times, Andrew, was, and Ryan actually, what are the most important roles to make this project successful at Wolverine?
Yeah,
I can go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
You go.
Yeah, sure. So, I think what, the most important roles to make the project successful, I think, really having that top-down leadership and that support, that executive level support to bring in this software application. It's still relatively new. SAP, does a great job of performing quarterly updates. So we're always getting more and more new functions and features that we're exploring as those updates are pushed out. But again, I think Andrew mentioned, it had a good call out on this, really IT and the corporate FP&A team really harmonizing and aligning and walking step by step through this entire process has made it incredibly successful. So he has, we have all the support we need from our corporate team, and then really, the full disposal of my team in IT to help make this successful where it need be. So Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think that was really good. The way that our project team is structured, maybe just to add a little color here, is that we were able to identify 3 levels of support for this project. At the highest level, we had a steering committee that consisted of certain executive sponsors that we update on more of a monthly or twice a month basis. At the next level down, we really have a core team that manages the day-to-day questions of the project, and that group meets twice a week to work through the various stages of the project. And on that team, we've been very successful at having one person kind of run point, who was the subject matter expert from a consolidated perspective. And perhaps that's unique to a company such as ours, where we have so many stakeholders across so many different functions, but to find that one go-to finance person, and then to try to find somebody who's really fully focused on the IT and the data and the connections. Those kind of 2 roles go hand in hand to partner on the day-to-day. And then at the lowest level, we had subject matter experts across all of our kind of brand groups and functions and channels, so that we could get proper testing of the tool across any different areas of responsibility. So, for example, we have an office in London where they have different requirements due to the number of countries out there in the EU that get captured in this tool. And being the fact that Ryan and I are both based in the U.S., we relied on some partners over there as our subject matter experts for those areas. So we did it in kind of a tiered and layered way to keep the project on track and to make sure it was successful.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Actually, another question for you, Andrew. There's a lot of questions about IT reliance. If you need to make adjustments to, I don't know, some of your process in your SAC planning, how much IT reliance do you still have?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we spoke to it in a little bit in the discussions about the planning history. So one of the reasons we moved to Hyperion was because we wanted less IT reliance, and that's when we pulled the kind of system administrator and functionality right into the FP&A group. And what we found out was that we still had IT reliance even with that structure, because all of our data needed to be integrated into a more comprehensive and integrated planning process. For example, we have planning that's done for product and inventory that's coming inbound, but we also have sales planning, we also have people planning, and we also have long range planning. And all of these things kind of have to go together and connect. So by breaking out our financial planning, we ended up losing some of that ability to stay integrated. What I think we've done to solve that is not only partnered more closely with our internal team, but retained that role of a systems administrator reporting into our finance group. So we do have an expert kind of on call directly dedicated to the tool that's able to make changes for us. And that is because the relative size of our company is larger, that we have that many questions and changes and tweaks that might need to happen, but also just from an ongoing support perspective, as new users are getting up to speed, it's great to have somebody embedded right in the finance organization structure to go do that training and answer those questions and be that first point of contact when we do need to reach out to the more technical IT team, which, and just to expound on that a little bit more, as people have questions, then they have one kind of place to go for those questions, and it can funnel directly through my team before it gets to a technical question, which keeps some control over the change management of the tool too.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think this will be our last question, and it actually goes with you as well. How much of your FP&A process are you planning to move into SAC? It was somewhat addressed at the beginning, but as a summary.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. This is just one component of our integrated planning across the company. So to get the workforce solution right is really, really important to us, because people are not only critically important to our company, but they're a large cost to the company as well, a big piece of our cost structure. But we plan to we are in the process or have already accomplished bringing in planning for our full P&L right in SAC. So from revenue across all those channels through SG&A, including purchase services and all the other components, we're able to build out a full P&L right in this tool, which we're then able to export into our business warehouse and compare side by side with our actual results. And what we're coming to find out is that in certain instances, bringing the data out into the business warehouse is not even necessary, because we can reflect those comparisons right in SAC. We can bring some of our actuals right into SAC, and we can use the rich visualizations and analytics to help us tell our stories right in this tool, and we don't need to rely as much on Excel-based reports. Now, there's still going to be a place for those on an ongoing basis, as any CPA, accountant, or finance person here knows, is that Excel will have its place. But to tell stories, especially to non-finance partners, having visualizations to go with those is, in my opinion, probably going to be an enhancement on current processes that revolve more around PowerPoint decks. It's going to be visualizations and supporting schedules behind them, along with narratives that probably are going to be a richer storytelling experience than a PowerPoint deck in the future.
Thank you, Andrew. So thank you, everyone. Sadly, we're out of time. Well, we tried to answer most questions online, but if you do have questions when we end this webinar, do not hesitate to contact us directly at Simplify, and if necessary, we will actually put you in contact with Andrew or Ryan if the question is really addressed to them. So thank you very much, Zarmina.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So that concludes our webinar for today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Ryan, Andrew, and Eric for your time and effort in putting this webinar together and for really giving us this thorough presentation. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to John from Simplify as well, who was answering questions throughout today's session. And I'd also like to say thank you to our audience for your participation using the question box. We really did enjoy seeing all of your engagement throughout this webinar, and you asked some great questions. And I'd also like to mention again our survey. So you can access the survey by clicking on the 3 smiley faces in the bottom widget bar. This survey really does help us in planning future webinars that you all would enjoy. It's only 2 multiple choice questions, so it shouldn't take too long. Please do try and fill that out before you exit the session. And lastly, I would like to highlight our upcoming webinars link in the resource box. Here you'll find any resources to follow up with our upcoming sessions. And with that, I will close out this webinar. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and we will see you in the next one.